To deep dive into the solar plexus itself, how it operates. I'm going to hop back and forth a bit between defined versus undefined, because again, one of the things that for me needs to be really clear in all of this is that everyone has everything. It's just the way in which you experience it. So I'm going to go through kind of what the background frequency is, the changes that are happening now so that we're starting to see unfold, how that impacts us physically, what that means for us as emotional beings. And gate 6 of the solar plexus is the gate we're going to focus on today because it is the source of all waves. So this video specifically is the cross of planning and going into the cross of the sleeping phoenix and what that means for the way that our bodies are operating, the solar plexus by itself, and gate 6, which is the source of all emotional activity. So universally, we have what's called global crosses, similar to a personal incarnation cross when you're born. And so we have been living under what is called the cross of planning since 1610. The cross of planning ends in 2027. So living under the background energy of the cross of planning is all we've ever known in our lifetime, right? And with everything universal, it's waxing and waning. So what we're seeing now is the waning out of the cross of planning overlapping with the waning in, or the waxing in of the cross of the sleeping phoenix. So when we watch the moon, and there's lots of talking about the moon, right? We understand that as things transit through the universe, they impact us, right? We get it. We feel it. We know it to be true. But what I want you to know is that we've been living under this cross of planning. The background frequency has been the 4037 channel, the 16-9 channel, and the 4037 channel is the channel of community, the channel of family, the channel of institutions. It is the background energy that has allowed us as a society, as a community, to build schools, hire police, build these big institutions. Everything is about the contract. This is we're living in our contract world, right? And the 16-9 is a channel that focuses on skills, and a deep focus on skills and the foundation of science and the scientific explosion of knowledge and all of those things that are benefit to the tribe in our contract, right? And so while we're not going to specifically talk about other centers, understand that contract energy resides in the will center, which is the small triangle. I'll just grab a chart for one of the grandkids. So this would be the will center. And the will center is where the energy sits for social contracts, right? And social contracts are the contracts that we're living under, the contracts between the government and the people. And literally, that background frequency is going away. And we're seeing it right now. We're seeing the disruption of government systems and processes on a global scale like we've never seen before. And this isn't my doom and gloom, the world is coming to an end, but the background frequency is changing. And so the contracts are going to end, and new contracts, new agreements, and new understandings of how we interact with one another on the planet are going to be replacing it. And it's going to be under the energy of the sleeping phoenix. So we've also been, and here's something I want you to know about with the cross of planning. So as you start in a cross, I'm going to get, Megan, I promise, I'm going to get to all of that. Give me just a minute. So when we start with a new incarnation cross, it counts through the lines backwards. So keep in mind that there are always 6 lines in human design, right? And those are the lines that give themes to your profile, but there's always 6 lines in everything, right? So, and the lines move backwards. So when we entered in the 1600s, the cross of planning, we started in line 6 and we've worked our way now to line 1. When we enter into the cross of the sleeping phoenix, we enter in line 6 and we go back to a 6th line theme. And so I'm saying this because those of us who have a 6 in our profile have always lived currently under this energy of 1, this energy of foundational building, of having these establishments in order, having this information, and it's really, really important to into this 6th line theme. We will have far more resonance to the energy of that 6th line theme, right? And so if you're a 1st line, you're going to feel the energy of that shift in a different way than those of us who are 6. We're going to feel really at home. And if you have a line that's 1 in your profile, you're going to feel like, ooh, what happened? I don't feel as comfortable anymore, because all of the foundations are shifting. And that's really a part of what a 1 line loves to feel to thrive. Okay. The background frequency is also going to change in terms of gates. And so as the gates mutate and shift, we're going to go from what we call this tribal collective energy. So we have individual energy, tribal energy, collective energy. So individual, tribal, collective, right? And what the shift is also going to bring is far more individual energy. Well, what does that mean? It's not necessarily about being selfish, but it's going to be energy about us focused on taking care of ourselves, because we can't depend on those institutions out there to do it for us. We have to become more self-reliant and more resilient, right? And so we need to be in a position that we know how our body operates, we know how to respond, because our body is always going to give us the right compass and direction for our next step. And that's what we need to learn to trust. And so right now, as we are living through what we're all seeing, right? This global pandemic, all of this fear, people behaving in ways that seemingly are completely irrational, right? Because hoarding toilet paper is a weird thing. Having enough supplies to last you is one thing, but for people to go into stores and like wipe out toilet paper is so, my point is that we're beginning to see the unraveling of what people perceive as the security of the world around them. And unless you know what's right for you and how to respond for you and how to behave for you, you can easily get swept up in what other people are projecting out there. Okay? Expect, and so again, this isn't me I'm definitely not a, the sky is falling doomsday person, but expect that things that would fall under the purview of cross of planning are going to begin to falter, fail, and go away. This is really about us going to the grocery store and going, oh wow, there's no bread here because people are crazy. Or, oh wow, there's no toilet paper here because people are, it's recognizing that these support structures aren't going to operate in the way that we thought they were. Now, my perspective on this, and I am so glad to see you here, Leisha, because you're the one who called me out, and that's why some of these things around growing your own food and doing container things and helping sustain yourself are coming from me next. But it's really about, what can I do to ensure my safety, security, my abundance? And let me be clear, abundance will still be available. I'm going to challenge you to really dig deep for what abundance means. Really dig deep for what that means for you. Because wealthy is about being well and healthy. It's not just about money. Dig deep for what it means to be abundant. Okay, so the themes of the emotional solar plexus are emotions, the nervous system, emotional waves, moods, feelings, desire, passion, romance, sex drive, food. All of that is part of your emotional solar plexus. So I'm going to talk briefly about when I say not self, what I'm talking about is patterns of behavior you could find yourself in because you haven't begun to work on recognizing the way that your inner being operates. Okay? So not self behavior of the emotional solar plexus is someone who would avoid confrontation and avoid things that are truth, right? The spleen, the ajna, and the solar plexus are the three awareness centers in your being. And each one focuses on our experiences in our body, our mind, and our spirit awareness. And so the solar plexus is really the spirit awareness. The solar plexus is also the only awareness center that is also a motor. So it has power behind what it does. And that's why I'm focusing on this one first. It has the largest impact on the people around us and outside of us when we talk about how these centers operate. So your solar plexus center, if it's colored in, is defined. So when the center is colored in, it's defined. When it's defined, that means it operates in a specific kind of way. Okay? If your solar plexus is defined, it is automatically your authority for decision making. Okay? It is not easy, and it requires patience and discipline, because you need to be able to wait out uncertainties and emotional inconsistencies until you are as clear as possible around making your decision. But when I say this, I want to make sure you understand that I'm not talking about deciding what you want for dinner. I'm talking about deciding things that are a little more significant and impactful to huge, right? The emotional system is home to feelings, sensitivity, all of those things. And it is literally a biochemical fluctuation of emotion over time. And it can impact, and this is the other piece of what's important of understanding why leaning into understanding this is important. It can impact your nervous system, your lungs, your kidney, your pancreas, and your prostate gland. So those are the physical areas that can be impacted by the energy moving through your emotional solar plexus. When your solar plexus is not colored in, or when any center is not colored in, it is called undefined. Now you could have one that's not colored in, but you might have a couple of the gates that are lit up, or you can have one that's not colored in that has nothing lit up at all. The difference between them will become clear a little later, but let's just say when it's defined, it's a very specific switch that's on, and it's a very specific way that the energy flows. And when it is not defined, you have the pleasure of experiencing energy in infinite ways going through that. So colored in or not colored in, it's working. It's just how it's working that's slightly different. Okay? Your solar plexus is a motor, and it operates in a way that never stops. It is a constant rising and falling of emotions, operating in a frequency of a wave by the channels that link it to the things around it, right? You see and feel from the perspective of where you are in that wave, in that moment, which is why we talk about wading through the wave, because your perspective will shift as the wave moves, right? And your emotional wave goes from the highest hope, everything's rosy, everything's perfect, it's fantastic, to the deepest pain imaginable where everything's horrible and nothing looks good, right? It's an emerging awareness. It is dominated by the motor function, and it has really been transforming, growing, and increasing its ability and its awareness over the last couple thousand years, right? So when you think about the spleen, by comparison, the spleen is like the dinosaur in our body. It's fight or flight, it's instinct. And the emotional solar plexus is a far more spiritual connection to emotion and awareness over time. Okay? So whether you have consistent energy present because it's defined or not because it's undefined, the activated gates in your solar plexus can bring emotional uncertainty or nervousness, fears regarding your personal interactions. It can activate all of that, right? And following your strategy and authority while learning the mechanics of your solar plexus, honoring your body's constantly changing chemistry, can bring about invaluable understanding. And the understanding is going to allow you to come to a place where you accept your feelings and needs and desires and the feelings and needs and desires of other people with compassion. And compassion is critical because half of humanity is emotionally defined. And so we have a lot of people in our world, and we can see them right here and right now in our current circumstance, who are deciding rashly in high and low moments what they're going to do. And then the other 50% of the people are taking in and amplifying that energy and then super overreacting in response to the waves of the emotional people that are hitting them. So it's really, really a symbiotic thing, and it's something to come to clarity on for us as individuals to begin to learn to manage our emotional process. So where you are defined emotionally specifically, but in general as well, you have consistent energy and it operates the way it operates all of the time. When someone is open or undefined, they simply take in what's around them and then they amplify it. And I want it to be clear that the responsibility for the emotional tone of the planet rests with those of us with defined emotional systems really doing some work to understand how we're impacting everybody. So, Spontaneous emotional decisions, and we all know this, spontaneous emotional decisions bear a heavy price. And there's a very complex interaction between a defined and an undefined solar plexus that can cause really distorted emotions for people. Often people become medicated or misunderstood, at risk of some behaviors because they don't understand. And I can speak, from personal experience. When you don't understand your emotional wave, how it operates, how that feels for you, you can think there's something wrong with you, because I did for a very long time. The important thing to know, and so one of the skills we're going to get to, is whether you are defined or not. The depth of the emotions you feel are beautiful when you allow them, you experience them, and you release them. We are not going to identify with these emotions. We're not going to judge them as good or bad or right or wrong. They are an expression of the mechanics of awareness. They are nothing to be ashamed of. And as we dive into the gates and the themes, take notes of the ones that you have defined so you can begin to understand how you are experiencing them, so that you can be in much more control of them. We have 3 distinctly different emotional wave patterns. You can have 1 pattern, you can have 2 patterns, you can have all of the patterns, right? There are tribal, individual, and collective, and they're established by gate 6, which is the solar plexus tribal support relationship, connecting it to the sacral center. So I actually have that full gate of the 59-6 that goes from my emotional solar plexus to my sacral center, right? It is the channel of mating. It is the channel of relationships. It's the channel of procreation. So, which is why it's important for me to tell you, right, that everyone has everything. It's how you experience it that's different. And so that's funny, because Anita's telling me that she has the 6, which is not funny because it's not. But I have the 6 3 times in my definition. I carry a significant amount of gate 6 energy. And the 659 specifically is called the aura buster. And what that means, so there's some conscious and some unconscious, but you have the whole channel, which mutates some of the ways that that expresses itself. Excellent, Sophia. It is an aura buster. And what that means is you have the ability to be in the presence of people and bust through their energetic bullshit. And you can see them for who they are, for where they're struggling, for what they need, and they can't hide it from you or mask it from you, because you're busting right through their aura to the heart of them as a person. Okay, so imagine having it in triplicate, which is part of my gift, part of why I can do what I do. So let's talk about gate 6, which is called the gate of friction. And the gate of friction is what creates change, right? It's also called the gate of conflict. But all 6 different wave frequencies in human design reside in gate 6. It dominates your aura if you have it. It stimulates growth or decay, depending on the resonance of those it comes in contact with. So I hear you, Sophia, exactly what you're saying. It's what helps you as a coach and a healer. It's what has made this clearly the right path for me to be able to impact people. I've always been someone, let's say, that was able to have impact, but really fully understanding how and why is super empowering, right? Gate 6 contains our biological law that life needs friction or there's no reproduction, right? It governs our emotional pH. Gate 6 fuses sensitivity to the needs, passions, moods, desires, and feelings, generating a wave, which causes you to be discriminating emotionally and discriminating sexually. With Gate 6 defined, your emotional wave can feel very stable, and you are really here to be clear and learn about the flood of emotions the solar plexus brings. This energy is described as the hope to pain wave, defining fear of intimacy experienced as nervousness about being open to others and awareness of whether or not to bond. All of the streams of potential awareness are rooted in Gate 6. The remaining gates, which is why we're starting with Gate 6. So the remaining gates of the solar plexus resonate to the nature of the wave rooted in Gate 6. And all of the waves have two ends of that spectrum. So the deeply painful side experienced and felt by people is often called a negative emotion. And when it's elated or positive, it's considered pleasurable. The power is in utilizing the wave over time from pain to pleasure to recognize its true potential. Emotional waves are like the ocean. It never stops moving. There are times where you look out on the ocean and it is peaceful and it is calm and it looks serene, but you know that that water is still in motion. Sometimes it's a tsunami, sometimes it's a hurricane, and sometimes it's one of the most peaceful, beautiful places you can experience. And when you can look at your emotional waves from that perspective, embrace the fact that it never stops, but there's a point along there where you're going to come to clarity about these decisions that you're in, you're able to really use it as a tool. It is the gate of war and conflict. It's intimacy and emotional balance. It's all of those things in that one gate that sets the tone for the entire emotional solar plexus. Anita, you know I love you. Don't make me say some stuff. No, it is. It's a spectrum, it's a wave, and it's moving, right? So, defined solar plexus emotional authority. If your solar plexus is defined, your emotional frequencies of your defined gates are hardwired into how you consistently experience your life. I want you to hear that because that is how you experience your life. And that is what you are pushing out to the collective, whether you're in control of it or not. And that's why we're here, so we can master some of this. You can't really control the emotional wave, right? We can't control the ocean, but we can learn to roll with it and ride it out in a way that is most beneficial to us. Wait out your waves of emotions for decision making. You will have a unique time and frequency. It's not about explaining or controlling your emotions. It is releasing your emotions when and how it feels correct for you. Otherwise, you are going to cause a lot of chaos. When you repress your emotions or stuff your emotions down, because let's be fair, That's how we were raised. So when we talk about conditioning, we go back to how we were raised, right? And we were told it wasn't appropriate to be that way. We needed to control ourselves. We needed to not act out. We were sent to our room, whatever. Those things conditioned you out of the natural process of releasing those emotions from your body, right? And when you don't release them, they can cause all kinds of physical issues. One of the simplest things you can do, and I know I put the video up for the Ekongar mantra here in this group, is to remember to breathe and allow the emotion to be felt. And when I talk about breathing, I mean in through your nose, out through your mouth. Like, take in all of the air, feel it, and let it out. Allow the emotion to be felt. And in that simple act, you are honoring who you are as an emotional being, and you are allowing your connection to spirit to be open, because that is how we are spoken to in a spiritual sense. When we are emotionally defined, that's what's consistent for us. There is no truth in the now for you as an emotional being, and you are here to, you're designed to explore and feel things more than others. Taking in your experiences deeply over time, you cannot be in a hurry to make decisions, because we are here to make profound decisions. And so one of my, and I'm going to tell on myself, but that's okay. One of my standard responses has become, when people invite me to something, if I feel I'm off center emotionally. So I could be in a place where I really feel emotionally grounded and have a clarity, or I can be someplace where, ooh, it sounds exciting, or it doesn't sound exciting at all. If I am not kind of at where I now identify as my clarity point, my answer will be, oh my gosh, that sounds wonderful. Let me check my calendar and get back to you. I don't know if I have something scheduled at that time. Because I know I need to give myself the time to feel my way to what is correct for me. Sleeping on it, right? Correct decisions come from a sense of emotional clarity over time. Again, we're still talking about emotionally defined people. But I want that to kind of be clear, because we live in this time of, oh, yeah, you need to make it fast. Make that decision fast. If you don't decide now, this bargain's going away. We're going to give you an extra 20% discount, but you better, like, that does not work for emotional beings. Okay? What matters is your awareness and feeling correctly for you. So can we talk about my years as a customer service manager? And it was a pretty large role at a Fortune 100 company. And so when I say I managed customer service, our customers were like Ford, GM, Chrysler, Toyota, Honda. Yes, I am very, very good at that customer service voice. And I help the people who work for me be very good at that as well. Okay, now I'm having fun. I'm having fun. Okay, so what are the rewards? What do you get when you really come to the place where you embrace feeling your way through your emotions and getting to your decisions in a way that feels really good for you, right? It gives you a richness to life that will bring you pleasure, because we're humans, right? So questions to really think about with this is, if you are emotionally defined, do you recognize the emotional waves in your life that are yours? Don't need you to answer that now, but I do need you to start thinking about that. I do have, I'm gonna have to dig out the file and share it, a process that I use to begin tracking my emotional wave so it would help me become more familiar with it. It is to you, Megan. What does he mean it's not you? Of course it's you. It's professional you. And sometimes she has to show up and play. If you are undefined or open, and when I say those words, they're interchangeable for the purposes of this, the gates are going to describe the ways you're designed to experience emotions when you're encountering other people or even solar transits, right? If you are completely open, you have no gates, you have nothing. It's just, let me see if I have a chart with a completely open. Oh, yeah, I'll show you mine. So my root center, and I'm going to, it's open. There's nothing. It's just there, right? There's no dormant gates. There's absolutely nothing. If you are completely open in that way, you have a flexibility in experiencing emotional energy, which could cause confusion for you about how to interpret what you're feeling. Oh, it's funny because over here I can see where I just showed you my chart. So I kind of know what the lag is. You may not know what or who to desire, when sensitivity or passion is appropriate, or how to recognize and deal with other people's moods and needs. You get to experience their emotions in purity. And you're thinking, oh, great. But it's not even mine, and I get to feel all of it. You get to feel it and amplify it. Isn't that fantastic? So keep in mind that you magnify emotions. And really, if you are undefined in your emotional solar plexus, you probably need to spend some alone time every day to let your body release what you have received from other people. So, Leisha, I'm going to address that because, number one, I know your chart and I love you. And number two, you're also a projector. So, one of the things that's huge, and you're already kind of doing it, I think there are some things you intuitively fall into. When you come home and you lay down on your couch and you turn the TV on, laying down for a projector is the trigger to release energy from their body that is not theirs. That laying down is huge. Okay? So, again, undefined, open, you can magnify emotions and you need to spend time alone and release them, right? Here's the other thing that you have to remember. Do not make emotional decisions. You are not designed to carry the burden of blame or shame that emotional decisions can bring. Girl, no, you're not being lazy. What? You are intuitively giving your body exactly what it needs. And I had this conversation with another person who's a projector, and they were saying how they lay down and they're doing, they're reading or they're studying or they're doing whatever, but they're not really taking a nap. It's not even, you don't need to nap. Lay down, and that's the trigger for your physical form to release all of the mess. You don't have to take a nap, but laying down for you is huge to your long-term health and well-being because that's what releases all of the gunk. That's what we're going to call it. It's a highly technical term for all of the things that you take in from other people during the day. Okay? So back to you undefined and open people. Amplification, because the amplification of emotion you can experience, emotional confrontation can be really uncomfortable, right? So please use your strategy and your authority to help you determine whether or not you need to even engage in that confrontation. when you are not emotionally defined. Rely on, so Lige, I'm going to use you as an example because you're on here and you work with people, and I know some of them are crazy. One of them is my ex-husband. And let's say there's something going on in the workplace, and you carry that 18, you carry that energy of, you can see what the hell is wrong and what needs to fix, but there's emotional connections to what may need to happen. If you are not recognized and invited for your expertise to come in and advise on fixing that thing, there's no need for you to engage in that confrontation. It's not going to help serve anything. So rely on that strategy and authority, regardless of your type, right? I'm just using hers because I happen to know it, but rely on that when you are determining whether or not you're going to engage in something that can be confrontational, and you are not an emotional being, because confrontation is not your jam. The gift you get from this, the gift that those of you who are my people, who are not emotionally defined, who love me through all of this, right, is seeing me through it, right? You're developing wisdom. When you are open in a center, you are developing wisdom about the full range of possibility that center brings. You know how to enjoy feelings, and you learn how to let them flow through you without being attached. So I'm hoping that makes a lot of sense and that it's clear, right? So questions that you can contemplate if you are undefined or open, or things to think about, right? I don't want to go there. I don't want to say that because I don't want to deal with the confrontation. It's perfectly acceptable for you, right? Not wanting to say something because you don't want to hurt somebody's feelings. Determining whether you're going to say something or in a way to soften a blow. Let me see what's your comment. Exactly. But you're not here to serve them. You're here for you. And when you take care of you, right, everything's going to be fine. And so what I would say needs to happen maybe in those situations is later, and we don't know the design of the other people, right? We can't necessarily assume, but let's assume that the people who brought you in, who recognized your authority, right, are not happy that you left, then you put it on them to manage the confrontational tone of the meeting. You don't have to manage that. Period. That's all. So solar plexus defined or not, you are not the emotions that you experience. You are the passenger in the vehicle. You are riding the waves, observing them, allowing yourself to gain more perspective because of them, right? Learn how to surf your highs and surf your lows. And so what I have started to do, and I don't have any of my stuff here, it's all downstairs because everyone's home and I'm working from home. But for me, when I'm feeling emotional lows, I will turn on music in my bedroom and have a dance party. I will, I have adult coloring books with beautiful mandalas to color. I will do that. I will find a creative outlet. I attempt to sequester myself from other people. Other people aren't always as helpful as they could be. But when I know I'm in an emotional low and I'm dealing with people who are not emotionally defined that are going to be impacted by that, I do what I can to remove myself from their presence, and I find things that help me ride through those waves. If it's being a burrito in the bed with the covers, then that's what I'm going to do. But we're going to start working on ways of recognizing when we're feeling that low. We're not going to judge ourselves for feeling it. We're going to know that it's part of our feedback and part of our connection. We're going to allow ourselves to go through it, but not hold on to it with any judgment. If we know we are not defined, we're going to take a moment, we're going to take a deep breath, and we're going to know that someone around us is feeling that. We're going to respect the space that they're in, and we're going to give them the space that they need to allow their time through those feelings. So this is like the really big picture overview of how this all works. And gate 6, which is the home of it. So let's talk about what are the gates, what do they do, how do I know which gates impact my chart, how do I know how they impact my chart. So let's get into a bit of that, and then I'll be open for whatever questions you have. So the gates come from the I Ching. If you are not familiar with the I Ching, it's an ancient Chinese book of information and stuff. You can Google all about it. But the 64 universal life lessons of the I Ching correspond to the 64 codons of the DNA, which correspond to the 64 gates in human design. So when Ra compiled human design, he mapped out how each one of those 64 life lessons corresponded to a center in our body graph, and he called them gates. That's how that came together. So I know if you've seen it on my page, I talk about the telephone number, making the phone call, and how that corresponds to your definition. But here's another way of looking at it. The moment that we're born, a certain combination of gates are activated. And this is where Western astrology and I Ching meet. So like your astrological natal chart is a snapshot in time of exactly where the celestial heavenly bodies were when you were born. Imagine each one of those is a light switch, and those light switches are on, and those are the things that are turned on in the black side of your body graph. Okay? Now, exactly 3 months before you were born, we're not getting into any of the history of this right now in this class, but 3 months before you were born was the first time that process happened. And there was a snapshot 3 months before you were born, and those switches were turned on, and those are the red ones in your body graph. Okay? And it doesn't matter if 2 or more planets were reaching for the same gate. Everybody who reached for it gets credit, right? And sometimes they reach for it 3 months before and the moment we're born, and it just depends on where they were and how the planets move and all of that kind of stuff, which is how I have gate 6 so many times in my chart, because it's on my conscious side. So it's in my natal birth chart, and it's in my 3 months before you were born chart. Okay? That's how that happens. How do you know which gates are impacting your chart and how? Well, you know, because we're going to use Chatty, because you see them listed, right? They're listed. The gate, then there's a decimal point, and then the line, okay? When they're in black, that is your birth chart, that is your natal chart. When they're in red, that is your unconscious chart. Okay? So think of it this way. You are who you know you are, and that's what shows up in black. And your body kind of has its own thing going on, and that's what's in red. It's your unconscious. It's the way your physical being operates, not you, who you know you are, operates. Okay. So here's how you understand what a gate means for you, because now when we start tomorrow, we're going to deep dive into gates. Now that we've talked about what gate 6 does, whether the gate was activated at birth, which is black, or before birth, which is red, what planet activated the gate. So then the planets have themes of what they do, so where it's active. So as an example, because everybody knows about Mercury and Mercury retrograde and blah, 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 and Mercury is the theme of communication. So if that light switch was turned on in your chart by Mercury, that's an energy that impacts your communication most. Okay? The number that comes after the decimal point is called the line, and the line represents, okay, karmically, where you are in the process of learning the lesson, right? So when we think about lines 1 through 6, 1 being like that foundational line, the structure line, the learning line, line 2 being the line of the hermit, being the line of gifts you're not aware of that other people can see in you. Line 3 being the line of living life and learning it experientially. Line 4 being the foundation of the upper trigram, so another level of form and structure. Line 5 being that transpersonal energy transitional line that's about universalizing themes. And then line 6 being the mastery of that, right? Right, so yours being a 6-6, it's gate 6 in the 6th line. So specifically, just because I'm feeling called to do that, let me find exactly what that is. Oops, I went way too far. So we've talked about gate 6, and it's really difficult to memorize all of these lines and themes and so on. So 6.6 in black, 6.3 in red, right? So gate 6, the conflict, channel of mating, focused on blah, blah, blah. We've already talked about that, right? But when you specifically talk about the 6.6, the 6.6 is called the peacemaker. When you get to the 6th line, you get to the top of the house, you get to the line of transition. The 6th line in its resonance to the 3rd line is strongly fertile like the 3rd line, but less likely to reproduce. It is looking for something much greater than that. What it is looking at has nothing to do with the other person. It has to do with the world their children will live in. This is a deep look over the top of the roof out to the world. If you could hear these people in their wave, they would say at the high end of the wave, I know that I have to have children, but in what kind of world will they live? And at the low end of the wave, it's, I know I should have children, but it's a terrible world they'll live in. On the other side, they say, I am not going to have children because the world is awful. Or I'm not going to have children because I can't be sure that it will be a better world. And it has nothing to do with the nature of direct intimacy. And in that sense, it can be something that can appear to be deeply apathetic. This is the wave, the 6.6. The wave of the peacemaker is the wave of sympathy and apathy. It is in resonance to the role of the one night stand. And be reminded that this is deeply misunderstood. That may be the only time that a 6th line will actually have an intimacy. Maybe once in their life, or maybe a lot, until they learn their wave. Remember that this is also in their circuits in human design, and we haven't gotten into that, but this is in the defense circuit, and it is where life is being generated. The law of growth for humanity is make more people. Here it is not about who I will make more with. Here is the energy about what kind of world are my children going to live in. So I hope that that makes sense. It tweaks the energy and it makes it a very specific focus on that energy based on the line. The peacemaker, the discipline and integrity of a superior force to unilaterally cease conflict, to permit surrender and survival of its foe. I know that the world out there will never allow my children to have a decent life, so I'm not going to be intimate with you. Can seem incredibly irrational, but these are the kind of themes that play out in a 6-6, right? Then it depends also, right, what planet it's in. Because Mercury is exalted and Venus is in detriment. So there are different themes, and then there's the tones underneath. There's a lot of things that play into it, which is why I'm trying to strictly stick to in this how these things are working, right? So then, but you also have the 6.3. So let's go look at the 6.3, right? And the 6.3 is about allegiance. When we get to the third line, we get to the end of the lower trigram, we get to the line of adaptation. This is the end of the lower trigram process, and in that it's a line of introspection and projection. This is the line of making bonds and breaking them. The ability to secure support and create strength out of a position of weakness. It is a deeply fertile line. Neptune exalted, the destruction of old forms through union, or Neptune, Pluto in detriment, right? The rejection of allegiance. So again, I think first of all, if you didn't want them, then clearly you were in a position to decide that. But I look at the work that you're doing, and the work that you're doing is definitely carrying out that 6.6 theme of making the world better for the people who are in it, right? So when we get into themes, we need to be careful to not take them absolutely perfectly literally and translate them, because there are people who have children, there are people that don't have children, there are people who do have them that didn't want them, that do have them that do want them, that didn't have them that didn't want them. That's a different piece of this, but you can see how that energy is playing out for you, and you being 6 with a 6th line, and you being really concerned about the quality of life that's out there for people. That's the underlying theme for you that I see showing up through the gate. So I hope that makes sense. So if the gate is in a defined center, it is fixed and consistent with you, or a lesson that you're definitely here to learn, and you have access to that energy regardless of whether you're completely alone or whether you're in the masses at Times Square. It's just who you are. So again, back to when you're open, you take it and amplify the energy around you. So if you don't have it when you're around other people, you might just have it, it's just not yours. If you are defined, you have this energy when you're by yourself or when you're in a group of people, right? When you're not defined, when you're open, it is a trait that is not consistent, and it emerges primarily when you're around someone who has that center, or the transits are bringing that to you. So that's something to pay attention to, right? And then there are people who will set off your energy, right? So let's say you have something that's there, right? That when you're around certain people whose energy hits you in a certain way, and then we can get into base and color and tone, and it's not going there today, right? Their energy is going to hit you in a way that's going to cause yours to be called out in a specific fashion, right? It's not their fault. It's not that they're doing anything. So think of your gates in your open centers like light switches that get flipped off and on, but on their own, right? Right? So you're sitting there minding your own business in your nice, quiet, dark, emotional solar plexus room, and then I walk in and start flipping all your solar plexus lights on. And you're like, oh my God, the lights, what happened? That's what happens when you're open and you are in the presence of someone who is defined, right? So here's the other part I really want to kind of sink in for you. We grow into and with who we are. And just because you may not see where a gate line planet combo is surfacing in your life right now doesn't mean you disregard it. Trust me, we're going to see these energies playing out more and more as we continue down this pandemic pathway, right? So I believe I've covered all of the understanding of the emotional solar plexus from a general perspective and gate 6. Now I need my thing back up. What did I do with it? I pulled that one thing up. There we go. So are there any questions about what the emotional solar plexus is here for, how it's going to operate for you, whether you're defined or undefined, or what the role of gate 6 is?